This book traces Halloween from an ancient Celtic holiday called Samhain. Now, what does Samhain mean? The word itself comes from the Gaelic word meaning weakening of summer or the end of summer. This marks the day for the beginning of the dark months in the Celtic calendar. This holiday was mythical, political, and legislative. Many important events took place on Samhain. In this ancient world, there was no difference between the sacred and the profane. It was all one. In this series, I'm going to teach you about the 3 main rituals that are celebrated on this sacred day. It is from these rituals that we get our modern celebration of Halloween. The first ritual of Samhain is the sacrificial ritual. There are 3 cycles of the sacred animal in Irish mythology. The sacred animal is chosen by what helps humans survive. The first animal was the stag, which men hunted for survival during the Paleolithic Ice Age. The second was the divine bull. We see this in other cultures as well. The bull allows you to keep your cattle and your farm going. And lastly, the pig. The pig is most interesting because it is often disliked in other religions, but in Irish lore, the pig is an animal of the other worlds. It is important to remember in this Celtic tradition, there was no difference between the sacred and the profane. It was all one. The next ritual we will discuss is the passage of souls. We see this across cultures. Christians claim that on this day, souls in purgatory were moved, and even in Hermetic texts, the Emerald Tablet explains that the burial mounds were opened and the dead and living could mingle together. This is where the idea of trick-or-treating comes from. This tradition began in Scotland, a carnival-like procession of children in their costumes, like the dead emerging from their graves. They would search for candy or treats that represent offerings to the dead. This tradition was originally brought over to the U.S. by Irish and Scottish immigrants in the early 20th century, but has now been popularized worldwide. The next ritual we're discussing is the death and rebirth of the king. This is a test of worthiness. Kings were not always responsible for disaster, famine, or climate conditions, even civil war, but he was basically the manager of society. A man is plunged into a great cauldron where he suffocates. As strange and grotesque as that is, this is where the idea of witches' cauldrons come from. Understand that the cauldron heals and restores life. I don't fully get the rituals, but the ancient people did. The tragic death of a king is seen as a rebirth. The king has interacted with the other world and is able to face the new year. It's pretty interesting to think that the US elections happened so close to Samhain. This is another way that the Samhain ritual lives on today.